Hello and welcome to another episode of the Right Corner podcast. Today we're going to be discussing abortion, something that really I've cared a lot about in my content and a lot of debates that I've participated in. It's a very important issue. Up to about 1 million babies a year are murdered from this. But today I have Victor Nieves, who is the president of Life Issues Institute, a pro-life organization, and I'd like him to introduce himself.
Well, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure being on here. Like you said, I'm the president of Life Issues Institute. Been around since the '90s. The org. Been a big part, a big player in the fight for life to create a culture of life. We've got some cool projects going on, and there's just a lot to be done. We are a nation that, like you said, we're killing about 1 million of our own every single year. The estimate is somewhere around 65 million. Since 1973, Roe v. Wade, we've had about 65 million babies that have been killed. We've got the chemical abortion pill now. I mean, we've got, this stuff is being shipped to people's doors. So there's a lot of fight to be had, but we've had some wins. So I'm very optimistic.
So I actually met Victor through TikTok. He's been on the podcast before, and I first saw him debating against left streaming liberals on the platform that debate a whole entire host of subjects, and a lot of it was abortion. And I'd see him just kind of cut through them like butter. Like the way that he would argue on the pro-life issues was not like any other conservative that I would see arguing it. So, what would you say are some of the most prominent, popular arguments that people on the left use to defend this pro-choice position, which is a very clever name, pro-choice, because it makes us seem like we're anti-giving women choice. But what would you say are some of the top arguments? I know that you've written articles debunking some of the most popular arguments, but what would you say are some of the most convincing arguments that influence young women to think that pro-choice is superior to the pro-life position?
Yeah, it's kind of hard actually to answer that. I mean, so I've been a big believer, I've said it many times, there is no such thing as a good argument for abortion, but there are bad arguments presented really well. And so that's one of the problems that we've seen in the last, going back, I guess I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, it seems, in the debate scene online, is you have people who are dedicating, like 6 hours a day. I've talked to people who have literally told me they spend 10 hours every day, and they sit in these Discord chats, and I make fun of them and stuff because it's like you got to have something better to do. But they sit in their Discord chats, and they sit there and they talk, and they're like trying the war game. How can we present bodily autonomy better? And so to answer your question, that's probably the primary one that we run into just in comment sections and maybe a TikTok live stream, or just for the average person. Like if you're just at work one day and somehow this conversation pops up, you're probably going to hear something about bodily autonomy. You have some of them that are more like Philbro oriented, where they try and, they fancy themselves like the reincarnation of Socrates or something. And they're like, well, actually, what does what mean? And it's like you get into these conversations, they're just stupid, frankly. But so that's like a vein of this scene right now, but probably bodily autonomy, sentience. And then people always bring up rape. They'll bring up the 0.5% or so, try and make that a justification for the whole thing. But those are probably the two or three most common at the lower, I don't want to say like lower level, but it is like they're a little bit more surface value arguments. You'll hear stuff like, well, the baby, it's better for a baby to be aborted than to grow up poor. Or they'll say, stuff like that. That's just, that's not hard to refute at all. But yeah, there's a bunch, and it's like it's a game of whack-a-mole in a way, because every time they're operating backwards. Let me just say this. So typically, as people pursuing truth, the correct orientation is that you're pursuing the truth wherever it may lead you. And so you're in good faith, you're looking at it, you're saying, okay, what is logical? What is consistent? What does the science say? That all points you in the direction of being pro-life. The other side will typically work inverted. So they'll start from a conclusion and try and, philosophize their way backwards. So they'll say, we want to justify killing a child. How can we make this make sense? And so they'll go through these crazy hypotheticals, these crazy, well, what about this? They'll try and redefine terms and redefine words. And it's kind of interesting to watch. It's like Olympic level gymnastics where they try and navigate backward from a conclusion. But for one, that's bad faith. But it's never
Can you
going to
give an
lead to
example
truth.
of what you mean?
Yeah, so I think that like the sentience argument is the one that immediately comes to my head. There's nothing inherently special about sentience. Oftentimes if you ask people their position, they'll say something along the lines of the unborn baby, until they're sentient, we don't need to give them rights because what we value isn't so much being human or even being alive. What we value is your unique experiences. There's people on social media, I think Dean and Parker, they like to say the conjunct between past and present subjective experience. It's sentience. It's basically just saying sentience, that until you can process things, feel things, have subjective experience, you're not really a human being. You're not really deserving of rights. And at the end of the day, that kind of boils down to, well, I believe it to be self-evident. You can't quantify that. You can't measure it. You can't define why it's so important. But they know if they can get you to a place where it's just butting up, well, I think it's this way. Why? Because I think it's self-evident. But why? There's nowhere you can go from there at a certain point. That would be an example. They try and overly philosophize, these positions that sentience is a bad. And we can get into all of these. I'm happy to. They're bad arguments. Every single one of them. I stand by the statement. There's no such thing as a good argument for abortion. There's a lot of bad ones, and some of the bad ones can be presented well, and people will try and they do this trick where they try and use big words. Half the time they don't even understand them, and they'll try and just barf as many of them in one sequence as they possibly can to intimidate people, to confuse people. But if you take the time, you dissect it piece by piece, 80% of what they're saying just doesn't even make sense.
And don't you think a lot of that over philosophizing and using these word salads is to purposely muddy the waters to really confuse the audience that's listening? Because when it's just one on one in a private conversation, it's one thing. But when you have an audience like, as you named with Parker, Dean, that have sometimes over 15,000 people watching, when they have the, first of all, control to mute your microphone, when they're asking you deeply philosophical questions and then giving you maybe 7 seconds to respond, they ask these overly philosophical questions to muddy the waters, as you said, to kind of work back from their already fixed conclusion. Would you say that that's a kind of accurate summarization of how a lot of these pro-choicers argue?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's, and even I would say maybe this is just more insulting toward the people who do it, but I think it's true. I don't say it just to be insulting. I think they're doing it to like stoke an ego or something. They're doing it because you have people who the viewer has no idea what was just said. But if you just barf, like you'll hear people, there's certain catch-all phrases that they put into. Dean and Parker are so guilty of this. They'll put in which, like they'll say in a sentence, right? They're blah, 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 in which. It's like you didn't need to say in which, but it feels almost like a little academic when you say these things like, well, in which, or insofar as, or, they try and purposefully shove this very unnatural vernacular, right? Oh, you talk like that? I'm sure that's how you talk all the time. But they'll try to shove in these words and then they'll cut you off. Like you said, they'll cut you off. So it's almost like intellectual grandstanding, but they don't even know what they're saying some of the time. They just throw it out there and they'll be really impressive to the people who are watching, who also don't know what these words mean. But if you say them
Mm-hmm.
confidently enough, people think, oh, he must be a smart guy. You hear that word? I've never even heard that word before. Sometimes they're not even real words, but
Oh, of course.
that doesn't stop them. You know how it
Yeah,
goes.
right. And to give a little bit of context to the few of you that may not know who Dean or Parker are, they are left wing live streamers that prominently stream on TikTok, but also on YouTube. They've been doing it for some years. Dean is the bigger of the two. I think he has a little over 4 million, maybe even approaching 5 million followers. And then Parker has something in the universe of 2 million, many hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube. They are doing this on a day-to-day basis. They are influencing a lot of young people, especially I think that their main target audience are women. And this is an important subject because of how many young people that they are influencing with misinformation, philosophicized. I don't know what is even the word. Who knows?
Philosophizing, I don't know.
Over philosophizing concepts And yeah, it's important the pushback that you're giving. So now I want to segue into something else, the motive behind why I defend this position, the pro life position, why you defend the pro life position. And I don't want to speak too much for you, but I think that we share the same motive is because we're Christian. We believe God designed us. We believe that we are children of God and that we are made valuable because we are created in the image of God. We're not defending the pro life position because we like to exercise control over women's bodies. We're not exercising the pro life position just because we're debate bros that like to go online and basically have an intellectual chess match. We do this, our motive is because we are Christian. Now, the question to you is, what do you believe their motive is?
It's a good question. And I do want to add really quickly. Obviously, I am a Christian, so I would be lying to you if I said that that's not my worldview. Your worldview, if you're Christian, Muslim, I don't, whatever you might would be, your worldview, if you're being intellectually honest, shapes the way you view everything. So no matter what subject it is, it doesn't have to be abortion. It could be literally any moral question, maybe not like an economic one, but like a moral question. It's going to be shaped by your worldview. Now, in the West, we've always had a Christian underlaying for our worldview. That's what's shaped our national ethic. There are people who are not Christian who are still pro-life. My organization is technically not an overtly Christian organization. We're Christians in it, but as long as you and this is a Christian ethic, which it underpins everything. But as long as you agree that it's wrong to kill an innocent person, which is something established, of course, in the Ten Commandments, it's established all throughout Christianity, the Old and New Testament. As long as you agree with that basic foundation, then you should agree that it's wrong, to kill a baby in the womb, and for obvious reasons. But anyways, as to their motives, it's very hard to say for sure what somebody else's motives are because we can't read their heart. We can't know for a fact. What I will say, you mentioned like from a Christian perspective, we have seen child sacrifice since the beginning of time. You look at the sacrifices that were done to Molech, where you'd put a baby on a burning altar and they would literally sacrifice children to demons. I believe that there is spiritual warfare as an individual. I'm saying this. I believe that there is such thing as spiritual warfare. I think abortion is one of the devil's greatest tools that he uses these days, literally butchering about 1 million children every day. But you have selfishness. You have hedonism. And I don't want to speak too harshly, but it's just the facts. It's just the truth. I mean, you look at much of the justification for abortion. Charlotte Lozier Institute has a good graph on this. By far, I mean, the vast majority, in the 90 percentile, the vast majority of all abortions are elective. This isn't a situation where somebody was being coerced, which our heart goes out to anybody who's being coerced. That's a crime, by the way, to coerce somebody into having an abortion. But our heart goes out to those people. But you look at the vast majority of abortions, it's not coercion. It's not rape or incest. It's not fetal abnormality. It's they just didn't want the baby. They didn't want to have to not go to college. Or maybe it's the father was not present. That's something people don't think about or talk about enough. Many men think the correct answer in an unexpected pregnancy is to say, I'll support you no matter what you do. Wrong. That is not the correct answer. For one, it's not the moral answer, but for two, most often it's not what she wanted to hear. That is the mother of your child. Tell her you will be a good father. That's the correct answer. The correct answer is to say, I will support you. I will be there for you, and I will be a good father, and you will be a good mother, and together we're going to raise this child. That's the correct answer. And the correct answer is to say, no, we don't kill our children, actually, and be a man and stand up for the life of your child in the womb because it's alive. And you pretending it's not doesn't change anything, nor will it erase the stain on your soul.
I want to pause you there. So, pragmatically, because I agree with you, obviously, that these men need to step up and defend the life in the womb that's half his life, half his DNA. How far can he go? I mean, really, what can the man do legally?
Nothing.
What's within
legally nothing? A man has no rights.
Right.
No rights at all. And that's awful. It's one of the pieces of legislation that I would like to see personally. I'd like to see passed. But a man cannot legally do anything. It's not like you get arrested, right? And I'm not proposing, but hypothetically, right? You can't tie her to a chair and say, no, you're not going to the Planned Parenthood. You can't, I don't know, like put some sort of a muzzle on her so that she can't take the abortion pills. Like these aren't realistic things. And unfortunately, there's no legal, you can't like say, hey, I'm going to file a lawsuit or something like that. There's been people try to sue the abortion providers and there's been some mixed results as far as that goes. But realistically, the man can't do anything. So if you're a father legally, I'm saying more in that relationship, because even if you don't have legal power, you have relational power. And in a moment of severe concern, these women who find themselves pregnant didn't want to be pregnant, didn't expect to be pregnant. We know this from polling, we know this from anecdotal. Those women are most often not like chomping at the bit to get an abortion. Most often they're really scared. They're really, am I going to have to drop out of college? Kind of a thing. Am I going to have to, my job? I'm never going to be able to be the feminist girl boss that my psych professor told me I needed to be. What are they going to have to do? What's my life going? Is this the end of my life? And for many women who are in a unexpected pregnancy, they feel as though their life is literally on the precipice of ending. The one person in the world, with the exception maybe of the woman's father, the one person in the world who has tremendous influence in that moment is the father of the child. Now, there's circumstances where maybe he's like abusive, then he's probably not going to have much sway, and that's for the better. But in most situations, speaking in generalities here, if it's a couple, young couple in their 20s, they're in college, they weren't thinking they were going to get pregnant. They were doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. And next thing you have a kid on the way. She's terrified. And she probably doesn't really want to kill her child. If you come to her and you say, hey, listen, you don't have to be a jerk about it. I would encourage you not to be a jerk about it. But if you go to her and you say, listen, this is a crazy situation. We never thought we were going to be here. But I tell you what, I've not done this before. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I will fight for you and I will fight for our child. And I'm going to do everything in my power as a man. I will move heaven and earth if God lets me to be a good dad for that child and to be a good man for you. And we're going to get through this together. I anecdotally, I'm telling you, that would save so many babies. There are so many women who would say, you know what? That's what I wanted to hear. I've interviewed maybe, 100 different women now who have said exactly that, who have said the correct answer that I was looking for wasn't, I'll support you no matter what you do. Bull. That you'll support me if I kill my, like, no, because that puts it all on her. That takes all of it right back to her. She's looking for the partner who got her into this mess. You two, it took two to tango. You're a part of this. You don't just get to run away as a man. So you're an equal partner in this equation, and you just offloaded all of it onto her. And you said, no, I'm out. You figure this out. You figure it out in your most concerned, vulnerable, scared place you've ever been in your entire life. This is all on you. No. Men, don't do that. Do not do that. Go and fight for the life of your child. And again, like we said, we don't have legal avenues to do this, but the law is not the only source of power in the world. You can be a loving human being. There's influence there. The correct definition of power that many people subscribe to is the ability to influence people without using force or coercion. So power, I don't say in a negative context. I mean, you have power in this equation by being a loving, decent man. That is your source of power in influencing what's going to happen, and do everything you can. And I have friends. I was just speaking with a friend of mine in the movement, Sean Corcoran, who he did exactly that. And unfortunately, the mother of his child still got an abortion. And so that is heartbreaking, like beyond heartbreaking. He did everything he could. And she was hell-bent on an abortion. So it's not to say that you will 100% save the life of your child, but brother, fight for him. That's my encouragement, is fight for him.
So couldn't agree more. And my heart goes out to that guy. Just a side question. Did he stay in that relationship?
No.
Or no?
No, and that's the other thing. So throwing this out there, again, it's anecdotal. I'd be curious if somebody could commission good research on it. Everybody that I've ever spoken to and I've interviewed literally hundreds of people on these topics, women, men, people who've gone through abortion. Of the people I've talked to, I don't know that I have ever spoken with a couple who stayed together after the abortion. So people will think, the woman will think, oh, he's going to leave me if I don't get the abortion. No, he's going to leave you if you do. Because, and this is a truth pill that might be uncomfortable for people to swallow, most men do not want to marry and have children with the woman who killed their child. That's just, it's wired into us. Most of the time, that man is not going to see you as wife. He's not going to see you as the mother of his future children. You're the mother of his dead child now, which is heartbreaking, but it's not going to save that dating situation. Almost never does the abortion fix the issue. It adds, now you both were involved in murdering a child. And that's a bad foundation for a relationship. to be built on. Like, hey, remember that time in our 20s we killed our kid? Now, there are people who make it through by the grace of God, and I will always preach to people the cross is sufficient. I wish more pastors would talk about this. You can get through that. Couples have gotten through all sorts of things, infidelity, you name it. People have gotten through it. So you can, and I would say that requires a pretty strong reliance on the Lord, in my personal opinion. But it's not people think of that like, oh, if I don't get the abortion, he's going to leave me. He's probably going to leave you anyway. It's sad and it's terrible, but aborting your child is not going to make him stay.
Okay, so I hear you using terms like kill and murder.
Mm-hmm.
And abortion, we both believe, is murder. It is killing an innocent human life made in the image of God. My question to you, we've had some conversations off air about this, but for the audience, being in the pro-life movement, now that you're the president, even before you were president, you attended a lot of pro-life events where other pro-life organizations attended, leaders of those events attended, and leaders of the organizations attended. Is this term murder and kill a sensitive term that is almost shunned upon using in the pro-life circles?
Yeah. It depends who you're hanging out with. And I want to be careful the way I say it, because I have a lot of respect for people who have fought for 30, 40, 50 years to try and end abortion. But our messaging as a movement has become very soft. And I've written about this. I've talked about it before. That kind of soft messaging can be effective in reaching women. It's not effective in reaching men. And it also can communicate a great deal of hypocrisy. So we understand that killing a baby is murder. And let's take it out of the womb for a second and help illustrate the point. If somebody stabbed a 2-week-old newborn, little precious baby newborn, stabbed them, actually, let's make it really analogous to abortion, ripped them into like 8 pieces, because that's what they do. They will rip a baby. Fun fact, not so fun fact. When they do these abortions where they have to physically rip the baby to pieces, did you know they have to reassemble the baby on a table? When they rip the pieces out of the mother, they have to reassemble like a jigsaw puzzle, the baby on a table, to make sure they didn't leave any feet or any hands or any arms or legs, because if they leave it in the woman, she'll die of sepsis if they don't catch the infection. So they have to literally reassemble the baby. So let's say somebody does that to a 2-week-old baby. This is a horrible thing to think of, I know. But let's say somebody butchers a 2-week-old newborn baby. Would we have any issue with calling that murder? Let's be honest, no. We would all call it murder. We would say this is the most appalling, evil, despicable thing. Okay, let's change the location by about 4 weeks. Let's go back. Let's do the same thing to the same baby 4 weeks prior. And all of a sudden, you're really not supposed to call that murder. There are some who would say you're really not supposed to call that murder. And I understand the justifications for it. RC, you may have seen some people in the movement will wear these little lapels. You got like your American flag lapels that all the politicians wear. Well, there's one there's 2 models. It's either a 10 or an 11-week in gestation baby. It's their feet. It's a life-size pin of a baby's feet. And it's just a visual reminder, like, okay, even very early in development, which it's not necessarily the most relevant to the actual core of the pro-life position, but it's a nice reminder. Like that's the size of their feet. That's what you're killing. Because most abortions happen around that time anyway, between 6 and 12 weeks. And so that's how developed this baby is. One time I was specifically told not to wear the foot lapel because it reminds people of the abortion that they had. And it's like, well, I understand that, but we also have to call it for what it is. It's murder. It's evil. And so if we soften that language and we pretend that it's not murder, what does that communicate to everybody else? What does that communicate? Do we really believe that this is killing an innocent baby or not? Because if it's killing an innocent baby, we should have no problem saying that it's murder. We should have no problem whatsoever. Now, the counter argument to that is about the post-abortive healing side of things, because there are so many men and women. People don't realize the scope of influence that abortion has had over the years. So many women, even in church pews, there's statistics that float around as high as like 1 in 3 women have had an abortion, even in the church settings. I mean, it's pretty alarming. A whole bunch of men have been impacted by it. And so after abortion is incredibly traumatizing, it kills the child. So that's the North Star of the pro-life cause. We have to stop the children from being killed. But in the wake of it, you have men and women whose lives are destroyed. They turn to drugs and alcohol. I mean, think about what it would do to you to know that you killed your own kid. And so there's a lot of people who, even thinking about it, is like a trigger, a trauma response of sorts of oh my gosh, I did that. So the argument is that the feet lapels are triggering to people, and it's counterproductive to the post-abortive healing side of things. And I appreciate that. I get it. But if the mission is to stop the babies from being killed, let's focus on the mission of stopping the babies from being killed. So that is concerning to me. We've had messaging that's really targeted toward women for a very long time, and there's a natural female, and I love all of the women in the movement that have fought hard for it over the years. I'm appreciative of their work. But when you have messaging that's almost exclusively directed toward women, you can't wonder why men aren't involved. And so when we soften the language, we turn off a lot of men, and we do communicate a certain level of hypocrisy through it all. So long-winded, but to answer your question, yeah, I mean, even saying it's murder can be frowned upon in certain circles within the pro-life movement, and I do believe that that's pretty counterproductive.
Yeah, you wrote an article about it titled "How to Get Young Men to Fight for Life," and I think this is kind of where what you do with your org and what I do with my content online kind of has an intersection point here, because my message is targeted at young men. And in military training, they don't sit in a book club kind of circle and speak softly to young men to prepare them for war. They break these guys down. I had a short stint at a military school one summer, transitioning from 9th grade to 10th grade in that period. And it wasn't the worst of the worst of military schools, I'll say that, but it was a military school nonetheless. And they woke us up a few times, 2 a.m, made us all go out in the field. One of the idiots in one of the cadets, one of the idiot cadet kids screwed up, and we all had to pay the consequence for it. But my point is, they're not soft with guys, and guys don't respect soft. They I don't want to get too controversial here, but a lot of guys really have a hard time taking instruction from a woman, because it's usually coming from a more nurturing, soft place. It's not because we look less upon women. It's not that we're looking down upon them, but men need a fight to fight. Mm-hmm. And you painted an analogy.
There's not many Joan of Arcs. To jump in real quick,
right.
Once every 1,000 years, you'll hear a story of a warrior woman like a Joan of Arc who led men to battle all across Europe, conquered all of this stuff. Very rare. Typically, like you said, and this isn't meant to be like an offensive or controversial statement. It's true, both kind of biblically, but also this study of sociology, how people operate in groups. Men want to charge the gates of hell behind a good, strong man. Like, as much as we love Mother Teresa, if Mother Teresa tried to rally the troops in the Revolutionary War, and George Washington, she says, hey, you can sit this one out. Mother Teresa's got it handled. And she's going to storm, push back Cornwallis and win the Revolutionary War. No, like that's probably not gonna, as much as we love Mother Teresa, men and women are complementary. We're different. Men want to ride into battle, charge the gates of hell behind hard messaging and a strong man. That's just the reality of men. People don't have to like it, but it is true, to your point.
Absolutely. So what would you say is your stated end goal in an ideal world for what you're looking to accomplish with Life Issues Institute? That's a kind of zooming in here, but then zooming out, what do you think should be the stated end goal of all pro-life organizations?
Yeah, on the micro for my organization, I mean, we're totally focused on education. As pro-lifers, we have a blessed opportunity. We stand at a crossroads of all of the science is on our side. All of basic morality is on our side. Logic is on our side. Christianity, the Bible, the Word of God is on our side. And so we have a great opportunity. It's our piece of the puzzle, our piece of the mission is to educate people, to share the truth, to, one of the things we're doing right now is refuting all of the pro-abortion arguments so that people who are pro-life have a really good foundation. They know what they believe, why they believe it, and how to communicate it. So that's kind of like our niche, is delivering the education, delivering the information. We've seen it change people's hearts. We've seen it change people's minds. Now, zooming out to the macro, this has been a very important question following Dobbs. So for years, the big baddie of the pro-life movement, the thing that unified the troops, we were against this thing, was Roe v. Wade, obviously, for clear reasons. And it was a 50-year battle to get rid of Roe v. Wade. When that battle was won, it's my belief, and admittedly, I'm the new guy on the block inside the leadership circle of the pro-life movement. So no offense to anybody outside of that. I'm the new guy, right? I'm the new guy on the block. My read of the situation is that there was not a clearly defined next move. I've played a lot of chess. You know that. And in a game of chess, you got to know your next move. You don't just like move one piece at a time and think, okay, I'll figure it out next time. Let's see what they do. You're constantly thinking ahead. You're constantly calculating. What is my opponent going to respond with? What am I then going to counter that with? Is there a forcing line? Is there something I can do to make sure that this is going to happen? And it doesn't seem that was established, in my opinion. And so this big question, the one that you just asked, has not yet been answered by the pro-life movement as a whole. What is the end goal? What does victory look like? Before you go to war, you got to know the terms of victory. You have to know, under what circumstances do I declare that I was successful? I've won this battle. I've won this war. Plant my flag and we're good. The movement, you'll hear some slogans. You'll hear "make abortion unthinkable." Okay, yeah, I agree. We should make abortion unthinkable, but that's not concrete. I mean, we can't measure that. we can't. I mean, as long as there's one person in the country who thinks about abortion, then okay, we've perpetually lost. So the question is, what does victory look like? It has to be equal protection. You can look at, for example, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, that all people every American, regardless of your race, your whatever size, I would add to that, you have equal protection under the law, which would mean that if somebody kills an unborn baby, they're treated like they killed a human being. That has to be the standard. Without that, we'll never actually end abortion. It's not my position that abortion should be safe, rare, and legal. That was the position of Planned Parenthood 30 years ago. That's how they got themselves. That was their original marketing campaign, was safe, rare, and legal. And, we have some people who I think are slipping into that without being intentional, without even knowing that they're doing it. They're slipping into this idea that the end goal for the pro-life movement is to make abortion safe, rare, and legal. No, I want to end it. I want to make it illegal. I think it should be, this is a great way to say it. It should be illegal for anyone to kill anyone, or murder is probably the better word. It should be illegal for anyone to murder anyone. And so unless that's our standard and the unborn is included in that, unless the unborn are protected, our work is not done. And I think that that's a realistic goal, by the way. I don't think that that's another 50 years away. I think that we can do that. Putting on my biblical hat here for a second as an individual, one person plus God is a majority. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. We have historical examples of this. I cite Spain. You had the Islamic Empire had pretty much conquered the entirety of Spain. There was a very tiny little Christian holdout in the peninsula. And within a short period of time, they fought back and took back the entire country of Spain. You look at, biblical stories like David and Goliath. I'm sure the Philistine army laughed pretty heavy when David walked out with a sling to bring down like a 13-foot tall giant, guy. It didn't matter, though, because that one person plus God is a majority. So there is no goal that we can't achieve. I hate self-fulfilling defeat predictions. When somebody's like, well, we can never do that. Well, you were the one that was supposed to do it. So now you're definitely right. I'm never going to be able to bench 315. I probably won't, realistically. I'm too small for that. But congratulations. If that's your belief, you are correct. Or I'm never going to be able to run a mile in under 7 minutes. You're right, because you don't think you can. And so, not to be long-winded in my yapping about this, it's just that frustrates me when people think this has to be another 50 years. This is never going to be obtainable. If that's your view, I love you. Sit this one out and let somebody else come in with a be refreshed, be renewed. Somebody who's got that spirit that says, no, actually, I'm going to end this. We're going to end this today. And so That's both the micro and the macro. Put them together a little bit. That's what needs to happen.
So I have an additional question about the macro here. Before I get to it, I want to spin off a few things that I heard you say. So, to my understanding, there are people within the pro life org that would essentially be making a very similar argument that a lot of people on the left would make, insofar as the government being a baby daddy to single mothers and almost incentivizing we should be giving more programs to single mothers, which is not bad all the time. Don't get me wrong. I think there are necessary scenarios in which, whether it's a nonprofit or a government subsidy to some degree, helping single mothers or even single fathers in dire situations, like if a husband passes away, a husband abandons his family. But outside of that, do you hear similar arguments where they're almost incentivizing to just have as many kids as possible and the government's going to take care of it, or some organization's going to take care of it, as like a incentive to, okay, don't abort the baby,
Mm.
but have the government step in and kind of be your baby daddy?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And it's a question I don't think enough people are asking, to be honest. It's there is a good place for helping those women, as you just described. Say a family where the dad just runs off, kind of a thing. The church is who should fill that void. That's my belief as a person. Um, that is the role of the church. That is a biblical command to take care of the widow. It's a biblical command to take care of the these people and these to give to the needy. Right. That is a biblical command. Now, what we have to ask ourselves in the pro life movement is: are we trying to outflank the left on the left? Because if we have them say this, we've heard the line, if you're really pro life, then, and then they insert something that has nothing to do with the foundation of the pro-life position. The foundation of the pro-life position is murder is wrong, regardless of how small the victim is. That's basically the pro-life position.
For example, just because I know that you and I know, but a lot of people listening, if you're really pro-life, then you would be anti the Second Amendment.
Yes, or if you're really pro-life, you would support insert social welfare program, kind of a thing. Like we hear this all the time, and it's not to say that that's not like a secondary or a tertiary, some sort of like a peripheral outreach of being pro-life. If you really value the sanctity of human life, I think it does follow logically that you would likely have something on your heart to go like help people out, to say, what, I care about. We see this: pro-life Christians adopt more children than anybody else. Pro-life Christians foster more children. They work more food banks. So we're already seeing this. Like this already does happen, but it's not a prerequisite necessary condition to think murder is wrong. Right? That's what I always caution people is: don't take the bait. When we hear this coming from like radical left-wing pro-abortion supporters, they're like, well, if you were actually pro-life, you would vote for FDR's second Bill of Rights, and you would say you give a guaranteed house to everybody, and you would say, let's just, maybe they haven't said this one just yet, but it's probably coming, universal basic income. You have to support whatever the social program is. And listen, by the way, maybe you have a listener who vehemently disagrees with me on everything. Maybe it's like a ravenous socialist kind of a person. If you agree on the sanctity of life, I'll fight with you. I don't care who you are. If you want to defend the unborn, I'll fight with you on this one. On that single issue, we can go toe to toe on the other ones. That's all fine and dandy. But I'm not, because I'm pro-life, I'm not going to become a socialist. Or because I'm pro-life, I'm not going to throw myself down onto a set of train track. I mean, it's like they try and come up with these, you have to do this, you have to do that. And now the state of Arkansas, as an example, does have good programs where they have, in many cases, reallocated state funding. They'll take it away from certain abortion providers or some of the more wicked things, and they'll try and put it toward like a pregnancy resource center. And I think that there's definitely merit to that. I do support that legislation, but we have to be careful that we're not taking that philosophy to the point of becoming, social, because that is not the required. If you want to go there, that's between you and whatever, but it's not a required belief. To be pro-life, you don't have to be a socialist. To be pro-life, you just have to say it's wrong to murder people, even if they're small. Like that's the position of the pro-life view. And so, yeah, I mean, the church, really, what you're describing the church has that obligation. That's my personal position, personal belief, is we shouldn't be using the state to force people to fund somebody else's child. That's a totally different issue. Now, you could say you want to, and I think you should. I think the church should. I think that that's something that needs to be done. And I understand why the state has come in. This is me getting off on a soapbox a little bit unrelated. But when the church fails the government, nature hates a void. So when you do have a legitimate biblical obligation and the church is not fulfilling it, somebody else is going to try to, and they're probably going to put a gun to your head and, tax you and all this stuff. Not to get all libertarian, but either way, yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky and a delicate balance. And I can kind of appreciate both perspectives. I think people come to it, many of them innocently, and they say, well, we really should be funneling in money to universal basic income. And maybe they just haven't thought it through. But that is not a necessary outbranch of being pro-life, not at all.
So to revisit the macro question that I have, and follow me here. Okay.
Okay.
Hinge is a dating app, and their mission statement is the app designed to be deleted.
Mm.
It wants you to find a relationship and not have a need for the app anymore.
Yep.
A lot of people in the pro-life movement obviously are compensated for doing what they do, whether it's being a president, or maybe it's editing content for the organization, or you're a representative of some sort. It's a job. Okay, that's fine. My question is the stated end goal for all pro-life organizations, shouldn't it be the organization designed to be taken out of existence?
Yeah.
Because,
I love it.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then just to add to it, because if that is not the intended end goal, if the intended end goal is to exist forever, that also means that abortion exists forever.
Yep.
Because if we get a federal ban on abortion, it's not to say that it's still good to continue to remind people why pro-life is important. But obviously, a lot of organizations would pretty much cease to exist.
Yeah.
So,
No, you're
what are your
100%
thoughts
correct.
on that?
You're 100% correct. That should be the philosophy of virtually everybody in the movement. Now, I will throw out a thing. There's going to have to be some remnant of the pro-life movement that's around. Otherwise, nature hates a void. We're going to have to make sure that we keep this. It's kind of like after a war, you keep a peacekeeping troop. You keep people around for a while to make sure nothing else pops off. The war is over. You've won. But you do still, you monitor the situation for just a minute. But yeah, the goal absolutely is to get rid of, I'll say it this way. I'm young enough. I could do this for another 40 years. I could spend 40 years doing this, and then I could pass it on to my kids. And I could say, here you go. Here's dad's mantle. Here's the fight. You guys take this for another 40 years. I will consider that a failure if that has to happen. I will consider that a personal failure. And that's not to say the people because there's people who have done that. And I don't mean that they're failures. I'm saying we're in a different position now. You could even make the argument we're standing as a movement on the shoulders of giants. They have gotten us very far. We've had significant wins. I want us to pull the trigger in our lifetime. I want us to end this. I don't want to pass it off and say, hey, thanks for the last 40 years. Let's do it again. No, I don't want there to be another 40 years of babies being murdered in this country. I want us to end it. And if ending it means that I'm out of this job, thank God. I will be jumping up and down, not because I don't like the job. I love the work that I do. I think this is amazing work. I would encourage other people to get involved, be involved in fighting for something bigger than yourself, fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. That's an amazing cause, especially for men. Men should get involved in this. It's like hardwired into your brain. But anyway, the day that I lose income from this, I will be jumping up and down, praising the Lord, because it'll be the end of abortion. It'll mean that we have finally done what we set out to do, which I think you said it was Hinge, is the one who's like, we're designed to be deleted. Heck yeah. We're designed to be deleted. That is the goal. That is the whole thing, is that we would so thoroughly win this that I don't have to do this anymore, that nobody has to do this anymore, because we don't have children being butchered in our country.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not part of the pro-life movement insofar that I'm not working for any of the organizations, but in the peripheral, I definitely argue in favor of it. And I want it to end. I've even had debates with people in the pro-life movement that are saying that I'm going too far when I when I say that a woman should be arrested. Because let's make it
Mm.
pragmatic for a moment. Because it's one thing to just argue, yeah, it's wrong and it shouldn't be legal. Okay, but then let's kind of take that thought experiment and take it to its conclusion. So then, what happens in the event that a woman does get an abortion? And I've debated this with Christians, and not even in the pro-life movement. They're not content creators, just Christians in the church. I remember speaking to this one pastor, and he said he would not speak about abortion in the church. And I'm thinking, okay, so does culture override what's biblically true? Because people's feelings are going to be offended because this has been kind of culturally appropriated and normalized and desensitized to a bunch of young women and young men, that you're not going to bring up controversial subjects in the church, which is a different conversation in and of itself. And
Yeah,
I
but let
think
me
there's a
jump
lot
in here
of,
real quick.
yeah,
I'll be very quick. When a pastor refuses to preach about abortion, it communicates to his people one of two things, which I would say are probably equally bad. The first that it communicates is that abortion's not that big of a deal. Abortion's not that bad. If abortion was bad, my pastor would have told me. Alternatively, if they know that abortion is bad, what it tells them is that God's not that good. Because either you get what I'm saying? Either abortion's not that bad or God's not that good. Because let's say abortion is so horrible, well then the cross is insufficient for you. You've done something that even God, even Christ can't redeem on the cross. Your sin is that bad. Those are the two things that one of those two is what is communicated by a pastor who doesn't have the courage, who fears his congregation more than he fears his Lord, and refuses to speak up on these issues. Not saying something is saying something. You're telling your people that abortion's not that bad or that God's not that good. And that really fire. I get so frustrated. I love pastors. I'm a Christian. I'm a devout Christian. I love pastors, but my word, you've got a serious responsibility to talk about the things that are affecting your flock. I promise not to be long-winded with this. We get the example of David as a shepherd. We see all throughout the Old Testament that pastors, men of God, are viewed as shepherds. Leaders are viewed as shepherds. When David, in the Old Testament, he was a shepherd tending to a flock of sheep. David had a lion enter into his pen. It was going to come and eat his sheep. You know what David did? Did David walk up and have a lovely conversation with that lion? Did he say, "Hey, well, if you think about how this is going to hurt the feelings of my sheep," and no, he freaking killed it. He walked up and he killed it. And then a bear came in not long after and he freaking killed the bear, right? And we have pastors who are sitting there. There's a bear or a lion ravaging their flock, ripping it to pieces. You've got people being devastated by abortion. They're killing their own children. And the pastor is sitting there flipping through the news. And he's just completely, "Oh, what's going on? I don't know. It's not that big a deal. That's not that big of a deal. We just have 65 million babies that have been murdered in the last, so long. It's not that big a deal. I'm going to talk about something else. I'm not going to address that." Holy cow, brother. Wake up. Smell the roses, man. Heavy is the head. You got a responsibility. And there's a bear eating your flock. Go take your sling and put that thing down. Talk about it. At the least, talk about it. You don't even David had to kill a bear. You don't even have to kill a bear. You just have to talk about it, dude. I mean, I'm off my soapbox now.
yeah.
That's
No, you reminded me of something that I've heard you claim in debates against people that are pro-choice, that are pro-murder. They're very clever with their terminology, but
mm-hmm.
they are pro-murder. It is what it is. You're either against killing people or you're okay with killing people that are innocent, and there's no in between. But I've heard you claim that even from a pragmatic standpoint, um, we are going to face a population decline
Yeah.
like Japan is in. So if you argue it from that logical perspective, what argument would you make to maybe try to extend some kind of olive branch to the other side that it's going to be to all of our detriment?
Mm.
And because you started throwing out numbers in that debate. I don't remember exactly what your argument was, but it's to retain the population as it is, because
Yeah.
I've heard people on our side argue that maybe this is the reason that they are so pro-abortion is because they want population to be declined. They want population control. But what were some of the numbers you were spouting off, if you remember, as to how to maintain the population as it is? What amount of births need to happen in order for population increase? And then what amount of births need to happen for a population decrease?
Yeah, so the golden number there is it's called replacement fertility. It's 2.1. So the easiest way to think about this is every woman should have on average 2.1 children. It's the replacement of the mother and the father. So 2 would be an exact replacement, 2.1 is just a slight round up to account for tragedies and things like that. So 2.1 births is what we need. That's the fertility rate, they call it. It's the fertility rate that we need. It's not just Japan, it's the entire Western world, basically all of Europe, all of North America, the whole world, with the exception of the continent of Africa, pieces of the Middle East, and a few blurbs down in South America. Everybody is below 2.1, which might not seem like that big of a deal. There was a book written, I believe it was in the 90s. It's called the Population Bomb. And there was a bunch of like sci-fi films. People believe genuinely that like humans are the real virus, bro. I mean, that kind of we saw it in pop culture for a long time. Totally inaccurate. The whole concept of the population bomb was that we were going to kill ourselves. Like there would be this global collapse because we would have too many people. There wasn't enough corn. There wasn't enough meat. There wasn't enough rice. Like we were all going to die. We were going to expand too much and then collapse. That was the basic premise of the population bomb. Many people believe that. You saw, and this was kind of happening to a little bit in China. China really did have so many people. That's why they implemented the one child policy. But China is actually an example of why that was such a terrible idea. China is now crashing below replacement. There's an argument to be made that they've like killed themselves. The nation of China is going to have a huge problem in the next 20 years because they don't have enough people. They have almost exclusively young men. There's like very few young women. So many cultural issues that we don't have time to unpack today. But what happens is this is a very utilitarian argument. It's not so much a moral argument, and I don't use it very often, but for some people it clicks. The idea here is that if we don't replace our population, what happens to our infrastructure? Who builds the roads? It's young people. And so the way that a population pyramid is supposed to exist is it's a pyramid, it's a triangle, right? Like the food pyramid, you can think of it that way. At the base of the pyramid, the thing that holds society together, the base of the pyramid should be filled with young people. Young people build the roads, they, telephone pole lines, they dig the ditches, they are the grunt of society. That's what keeps society going. And as people age, they die. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Some of us don't reach 90 years old. So the population pyramid should get smaller and smaller and smaller until at the top you have like a couple people 110 years old. And they're supported, by the pyramid below them. What we're seeing right now is the inversion of the population pyramid. There's way too many old people. And I don't say that like discriminatorial against old people. I love old people. But there's way too many old people and not enough young people. So if we're not replacing our population, we're going to see an inverted pyramid continue to get more and more dramatic. You want like Social Security? I'm not to get into that. You want that to be soluble. What do they call it? If you want Social Security not to go completely belly up and implode, you can't have more old people than young people. That's not going to work. If you want roads, you can't have more. So it's a very practical, very utilitarian perspective here. But if we don't replace our own population, we are dead. Like we're cooked in 100 years or something like that. No nation can survive. The only other option is to just import people from the rest of the world. That's another bag of worms. But you can't. Your population will collapse. It will. And the U.S. is about. Last numbers were about 1.6, 1.7, which might not sound that far from 2.1, but it's pretty catastrophically far. That's pretty bad. There's some places over South Korea was really low. Vietnam is really low. Japan is really low. But basically everybody is way below replacement.
Yeah, and as you mentioned a little earlier, that I think you said it was written in a book for the pro-choice position.
Bomb.
The population bomb, and it referring to human beings as parasitical.
I don't know that the population bomb for sure said that, but it may have. But it was that book was part of what created that culture of like all these movies. The real problem is humans, guys. Like we need less humans. Millennials were big on this. They were like, we need less people. I don't want to bring, we're the real cancer. And some of it gets into like the green, like the global warming, climate change people. Whatever the reason is, I just know we're below replacement.
Well, agreed. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that from a logical standpoint, no matter what economic system you support, no matter what belief system you have, you don't want to go extinct. We don't want population to be in decline. We don't want that pyramid to be inverted. So that's one logical, pragmatic reason to support the pro-life position. But what I was going to say is there are a lot of people that are pro-choice, that are pro-murder. I'm going to start referring to it as pro-murder only. There's a lot of people that are pro-murder that refer to human beings as parasitical. I've been in a number of these debates, and I kind of take it to its logical conclusion, which is if we are parasitical, what do you do with a parasite? You kill it if you can. And if killing people is okay and actually population is too big, because a lot of them will argue we're overpopulated, then what Hitler did must be good. What Stalin did must be good. What Mao Zedong did must be good. And try to getting them to concede to that, which is, well, sure, they were murdering a select group, especially Hitler, but if you're saying that it's good to depopulate the planet and human beings are parasites, then actually, why is Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, and other murderous dictators of the past, why is what they did wrong?
Yeah, because they called people parasites too.
They also, yes,
Yep.
they also,
Yep.
it kind of, that's kind of the root of it, is once you start desensitizing people to how valuable human life is, whether it's out of the womb and in a lot of these arguments in the womb. And to go back to something else that I was saying is I've debated a bunch of Christians. I told you an example with a pastor, but a bunch of Christians in the church, and I'll ask them if it's a newborn baby, 1 week old, and the mother and or the father both don't want to take care of it anymore because they can't financially afford the baby or whatever the list of excuses that women that typically get an abortion, an elective abortion, use. Let's use that same excuse for a newborn, and then they kill the newborn. Do you think that that mother and father and the doctor that did that procedure should go to prison? Without hesitation, they'll say, yeah, it's a newborn. That's disgusting. That's tribalistic. I mean, that's not tribalistic, but that's like very primal and animalistic. We should not do that. All right, so let's use the same argument, but instead of it being a newborn, it's a 6-month pregnancy. Yeah. And I'm arguing that that woman, and if the father is a participant and the doctor that does the procedure, they should all go to prison for the same amount of time for the same crime. And they'll look at me aghast. They'll look at me like I'm crazy. A Christian looking at me like I'm crazy for saying, well, if pro-life is what I'm defending and what you're saying you're defending because it's murder, then why are you going to have a lesser sentence? Now, and I'm going to wrap up here. Many could argue that she was influenced into it. She was coerced, as something you said earlier. Maybe she wasn't privy to it being a human life. And okay, yes, taking those exceptions to the side, let's say she is very aware. She knows it's a human life. The husband knows it's a human life, or the boyfriend knows it's a human life. The doctor knows it's a human life. 96% of biologists, by the way, agree it's a human life. Over 5,000, I forgot the name of the study, but it's by PubMed. And those are not Christian scientists or anything like that. I mean, these are like mostly secular scientists that arrived at the consensus that human life begins at the point of fertilization. But let's say that she knows that. She's aware that this is human life. Why should she face a lesser sentence? And when you hold them to that pragmatic standpoint as to, men, they would look at me and say, no, she shouldn't even go to prison at all. She shouldn't even be penalized legally at all. So then what's the incentive for them not to get an abortion?
Yeah.
Well, if you're just harsh words, is it like harsh words? Yeah. But if you get an abortion, we're going to love you and hug you and give you grace, as we should. But yeah, we'll give you that grace when you're in prison. Because if you know what you did, then we have to penalize these people. It's murder.
And so what you've highlighted there, that's kind of the crux of the equal protection debate. So this is a big debate that's happening inside of the pro-life movement, and you have a variety of different opinions. We've talked to people from different organizations that see it differently, than we do. But I like the way you frame that. It's called trotting out the toddler. It's we've done this in the pro-life movement since the beginning of time. When you need to make a comparison, you trot out the toddler, because there's no meaningful difference between a baby in the womb and a newborn or a toddler. And so obviously, yes, if a mother kills her newborn, she should go to prison for that. There's really no dispute. I don't know anybody who would say, no, it's okay. Like, that's fine. Now, there are slight differences, and I think that we do, and I think you did take those into account. Like, we have the counter argument, to give a little bit of representation to that, would be that these women have been lied to for 50 years, that they've been told by the abortion industry, maybe medical professionals, that it's not a human being, so on and so forth. And we can be sympathetic to that. We can also understand that the law can function as a tutor. And so we also have a law which says that it's completely fine, it's completely legal. Many people don't know this, RC, but think of a state like Texas, right? You think in Texas it is illegal to get an abortion. Most people would say, yeah, it's illegal to get an abortion. No, it's not. It is not illegal to have an abortion in Texas. There are certain circumstances in which an abortion is illegal in Texas. It's illegal for some people. Every single piece of pro-life legislation in every state, if you think Tennessee has a ban on abortion, or Texas, or you name it, no, they don't. Every single state in the entire country right now in the law has an expressly written provision that says that the mother can under no circumstances be held legally accountable for the killing of her child. So that means, and to put this into perspective, about 70% of all abortions in the United States, some estimates as high as 80, but we'll go with 70% of all abortions in the United States happen without an abortionist. There is no doctor. There is nobody involved. It's a pill. So right now you can go online, you can order abortion pills. They're very dangerous. About 1 in 10 women who take them end up in the hospital, but it kills the baby. It's primarily dangerous to the baby. So you can order those. They'll ship directly to your door. Now, in some states, it is illegal to import them, but what are we doing? Searching people's mail? Like, that doesn't happen. If you have acquired these pills, say you drove out of state, I don't know, whatever it might be, you have these pills, you have the abortion pills. In Texas, you can go to your local sheriff's office. You can walk in the front door with a positive pregnancy test in one hand and the abortion pill in the other. And you can say, hey, Mr. Sheriff, I know that I am pregnant with my child. I know that it is a human being. Watch this. And you can take the abortion pills, killing your child, right in front of them, and there is nothing. It is in the law. Nothing can be done to stop that from happening. Now, contrary, if your boyfriend, who's also had 40, 50 years of programming, he's also been told it's just a clump of cells, he's also been told all of the dehumanizing language about the unborn. If your boyfriend goes and puts chemical abortion pills in your drink without telling you, killing the baby, is that murder? Should he go to jail? Everybody will say yes. Once again, everybody will say he should go to jail for that. So the same circumstances we just said about the mother also apply to him. All of the propaganda, all of the lies, all of the deceit. And by the way, we do have in our criminal code, we already have, this would just be, the idea of equal protection is to apply the laws on the books surrounding murder to the case of murdering an unborn baby. So we already have, things to account for coercion. We already have all sorts of different, if it's like, there's a lot, we can come up with a million hypotheticals. They all apply already outside. They apply to other issues in the criminal code about killing somebody. All of these different intervening variables and all of these factors that could result in you getting off on it or could result in a significantly lesser punishment. We've already worked all of that out in a different context. It would all just simply be imported, like plug and play directly into the circumstance of killing an unborn baby. But if we are not willing to have true equal protection, to make it illegal for anyone to murder anyone, that would mean that we are okay with 70% of all abortions continuing in the United States because it's the pill. So if we're not willing to do that, and I'm all ears, I genuinely open the invitation to anyone who has an alternative idea here. I don't see a way to stop abortion without equal protection, without saying, yes, anybody who murders an unborn baby, anybody who murders anybody should go to jail for that, should face some sort of a criminal punishment. Now, it's important we say this would not be retroactive. We cannot do retroactive laws in the United States. We can't say, oh, well, we're going to go back and we're going to arrest anybody who's ever been involved in an abortion. That's not how this works. The same legal code applies to this, just like it would apply to anything else. But no, you bring up a really good point. And that's when I was talking about soft messaging and the apparent hypocrisy. Trotting out the toddler points out the hypocrisy. If a woman would go face criminal punishment for killing her newborn baby, why then would the same not apply to a woman who kills her unborn baby with the pill? It should apply. 100% it should apply. And maybe somebody can present a counter view on that. I'm all ears on it. I don't see a way that we end abortion without crossing that bridge. There's a pragmatic and a political argument that says now is not the time. There's an argument that says perp walking a woman would be very detrimental in elections, and then maybe the pro-life position would lose seats in Congress, and we would, might have backlash or something like that. And I'm sympathetic to that kind of an argument. To put a bow on it, though, it's my belief, and this is maybe my Christian worldview influencing me a little bit. It's my belief that if we pray every day that God gives us the opportunity to end abortion, and he gives us the opportunity to end abortion, if we can pass an equal protection law, frankly, who are we to tell God no? Right? We've prayed for this. We've prayed for this. We pray. He gives us the chance to do it. Say we get the opportunity, and I can hit a button on my desk that passes equal protection, but I refuse to hit the button. And I say, God, now's not the right time. What, do I know better than him? I've been praying for this window of opportunity for years. Yes, there could be downriver consequences. I think God can handle those. That's my position of faith as a believer. Maybe that it's just, I'm just being transparent. That's my view on it, is how can we say we're going to try and end abortion, we get the chance, and then we say, wait, now, now's not a good time. Now's not the right time. It's always a good time to do what's right. That's my belief.
Yeah. Another interesting point that I've made a few videos on it, but still not many people know this. All of the early feminists, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, the lady that was the first female presidential candidate, and the list goes on, they were all vehemently against abortion, and they were all pro-life. So you're saying that your Christian worldview is kind of influencing this hope that you have for the future. But we all kind of shared this Christian worldview 100 years ago. That was the bedrock. It's obviously going away. Unfortunately, the Christian population is declining, and even the Christian population that exists, like I mentioned about that pastor, a lot of them are allowing culture to override Christ and things that are true. But it's just interesting that the movement that for many reasons is bad, the feminist movement, all of those women were vehemently against abortion. And they often cited, and you can quote, there's a lot of quotes of them saying and comparing women getting an abortion to slavery or something of the sort, some kind of atrocity that's happened to humanity. And now I don't know any feminist that's not anti-abortion. They're all vehemently pro-abortion, and how that switch has happened. But listen, I've appreciated having you on. I know that you're a busy guy, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But for the audience that may not know who you are, where can they find you? Where can they find your organization? Where can they find your content online, on YouTube, anywhere? Let them know.
Yeah, you can find lifeissues.org is our website. You can find a lot of great resources. That'll be my first plug to everybody. You can also find us on social media, same handle. Just search Life Issues Institute, LII, Life Issues Institute. You can find me personally. You can find me, just my name, Victor Nieves, on pretty much any platform. I'm probably there if I haven't been banned. So thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. It's always good talking.
No, absolutely. I want to end it with just a little bit of an asterisk, because I'm a little bit of a controversial figure in the conservative space, but I think you mean very well. And I don't know, maybe you'll get a little backlash, hope not. But I try to argue for the right things, and I really support, your cause and your organization. And anyone that's listening, where to find me in the right corner on Instagram. But yeah, I would like to maybe do some more of these in the future with you. Let me know if you get some pushback for this one. I don't think you will. I hope not.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it. But no, look, we're on the same team here. Even some of the pushback that we've given to some people in the pro-life movement, it's not in bad faith. It's not any ill will intended at all. Women are great, and we complement one another. Men and women do complement one another. And there is a place for them in the movement. I just think, and I agree with your article, more men need to start leading that movement. And you had an analogy about this troll and cutting the head off the troll that's basically sacrificing these babies. And people should read your article. They can find it on Life Issues Institute's website, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. You should read the article so you have the full context of what I'm saying. But guys want to kill the troll. They want to go to the source and end it. It's anyway. I think people should give that article a read. You'll know what I'm saying. But okay, appreciate having you on. Great conversation. Look to hopefully have more and some different subjects in the future. But God bless.
Yes, sir. God bless, man. Thanks.